Theme of last week was be very cautious up in this area, and it's a good thing that we said that information because look at all the red that we have going on the side of my screen here. Now we need to do some technical analysis for the SPY, Qs, Apple, Tesla, Amazon, and NVIDIA because we still have FOMC minutes, and I have a new thing marked on my chart here that we're going to talk about that comes out January 11th. SPY is getting a down day, and we see that we're down by 0.56%. We're not outside of that weekly range as of right now for the SPY, but we're going to go over some charts that are showing you, a lot of things are outside of their weekly range, including Apple. So we really need to talk about that. Overall, with the SPY here, we mainly were talking about, hey, there could be some selling. We could go make an all-time high first. I still believe that an all-time high could be possible. Kind of depends on what Jerome Powell says tomorrow. So we want to pay attention to that. But we're stating if it does come down into that bottom side of the weekly expected move, expect that to bounce because we do like to land within these purple lines here 68% of the time. So this is what options have priced in for the week. And we could see a bounce if we do head to a little bit lower levels, but that could be setting up some kind of right shoulder. Okay, so we want to pay attention to this going into tomorrow. It is going to be a very, very interesting week. So we're seeing a bunch of red across the board. We still have to pay attention to any kind of upside here just because we are still right within that positive territory. So we haven't really seen that dramatic selling in the SPY to really convince me, hey, this is going to be a switch to a negative trend, meaning it crosses this center line, comes down into negative territory. So I just want to pay attention to that in the short term. We do have a gap above us that sits right where we would maybe make some kind of right shoulder. So if we did want to fill this gap this week, maybe we do see that selling come in tomorrow. People read Jerome Powell's news, right? And then we come out and see some bounce out of this. We really want to pay attention if we actually do come create some kind of right shoulder, because if this rolls up one more time, we could see that get into deeper levels, breaking down from some kind of head and shoulders pattern. Qs are what we really need to pay attention to. We were pointing out that divergence on the RSI, but not having that necessarily a divergence on the MACD at the same time. You'd really like to have those at the same time to get a full trend reversal on the daily scale. So at this point, until I hear some news about the FOMC minutes tomorrow and see some more price action, I am going to treat this as some kind of pullback. And overall, I was stating I really like this liquidity in here. So I'm going to be paying attention to that over the next few, probably couple weeks here. Just pointing out that we did get that crossing of the MACD, a pretty firm cross at this point. You're getting a sell signal. We were talking about how it really needed to hold up early on today to see some upside. So the fact that we just gapped down means that hey, the direction is going down. We did actually cut below this area here where we were looking for that right shoulder to come in. So there's some work to do from the bulls if we're going to keep this thing up any longer. Really looks like everything is flipping to the sell side. We're dropping below the 9-day moving average. So my signals have fully switched to bearish at this point. And if we get some momentum behind this, this is what we need to point out about these weekly ranges, right? So we're below that weekly range. And like we said, 68% of the time we do see that buyback up and we close the week within this range. But the thing about this is, if you do see closing outside of this range, this is what happens, okay? You either get that buyback up or you can see something crazy happen. You can get more dramatic selling once you do come outside of these ranges. So I wouldn't necessarily bank on us closing inside this range on the Qs because they're seeing some more dramatic selling at this point, and that is something to really pay attention to. And if you're looking for lower levels, if we do go to this area right in here pretty quick, that's really where I think you're going to see at least some kind of bounce. As you can see, we have dipped into that negative territory. So if we do get some kind of flagging or even come and fill this, if this wants to roll over and take out this low, that would be your negative trend beginning. This MACD actually would roll back up and roll back down. Most likely the second one will actually be more dramatic than this one because we will have FOMC news and things like that. So we want to pay attention to this because this might get us pretty deep into negative territory and get us down to that monthly expected move, the downside of that pretty quick. So to the upside, I'm really just paying attention to these gap fills up here. And then to the downside, I'm looking for that negative trend to really continue and come and target all of this liquidity. I think it's important to point out why the Qs are really selling off. And overall, I'm just from the technical side. That's overall what I follow. I just see these yields really getting a bounce. So you see they're in positive territory. We're going to go over those in a moment. But tech stocks really do suffer when we see those yields coming up pretty quick. So we're starting to see a little less rate cuts priced in, little more of the narrative of, hey, we could still leave rate raises on the table. And I think that if they keep that same narrative and maybe they just say they're going to do 2 rate raises, I mean, that is actually a rumor going on as of right now, that tomorrow they're actually only going to announce they're, switching from 3 down to 2. That actually would shake up this market. So we really need to pay attention to that going into tomorrow. But I am going to focus on what he is actually saying. At this point, it looks like the Qs have gone into negative territory and started that negative trend. If we can get some kind of push up and then go down one more time, you would really, really be convinced this is a negative trend at this point. For Apple, I'm going to give you that thumbs up, right? I'm going to give you that thumbs up. Big pat on the back. Give yourself a pat on the back if you were subscribed and you enjoyed this information about Apple, because we were just pointing out this is a stock that had that divergence up here on the MACD and the RSI at the same time, okay? So this is something that will get a more dramatic pullback. It's telling you it can reverse the actual daily trend. And we were just stating, hey, this area in here is very good. You're below that weekly expected move at this point. So something dramatic can happen, but 68% of the time we do land within this zone by the end of the week, by close. So we just, by options expiration, my apology, but we just want to pay attention to this because it can get pretty dramatic, and that's why I made sure to point out this other zone in here that I just created. I really like this zone because we've exploded higher from it. When we get above it for a short period of time, we saw selling come in. We see it as rejection. We kind of hold up within it, kind of near that purple zone. So it's just something to really pay attention to. You can see rejection here. We had a little bundle of liquidity in here, and once we get past it, firmly past it, we do see explosive moves. So I'm really paying attention to the downside, this zone in here, right around that 177, 178 level for Apple. Now, the thing about Apple getting this far down, closing below these levels, you see it's gapping pretty much all the way to the downside of this zone, which means it's pretty important. So the fact that it's gapping down, this is a weekly chart. We see that divergence coming in up at these highs. We see it right here on the MACD. We see it on the RSI at the same time. So if this actually does want to cross, that will be very, very bearish for the market. That means that the weekly actually could be getting into negative territory soon, which means very, very bad things for Apple in 2024, which means very bad things for probably everything in 2024. So we have to pay attention to this. Now, if this does want to, see some further breakdown, maybe cross throughout the week, right? Cross throughout the week or cross throughout next week and then buy back up, then we will have a different story. And I'm kind of leaning towards that. Actually, that January 11th is going to be when the CPI comes out. So depending on what they say tomorrow and then the reaction to the CPI, that will really dictate how we're going to react from this level and maybe from lower levels if we can get there. So it's just something to pay attention to. And overall, we just pay attention to this on this channel because this is a very, very strong signal that you only see a few times. And if we can see down here at the actual bottoms, that's what led to this big run, right? We got some kind of divergence down here at these lows, which we mentioned on this channel. So you did have this divergence between these two lows. You had that divergence on the RSI and the MACD at the same time, and look what happened. Now you're seeing it the opposite direction, so we have to pay attention to it. It doesn't mean it has to happen, right? But we can pay attention to it and then react because of whatever comes from it. Real quick on the weekly, you do have that same signal on Amazon. We have these highs up in here, and we do see that divergence on the MACD. We see that divergence on the RSI slightly at the same time. So if Amazon here does want to break down to lower levels, it surely can. And I just wanted to point that out before we go into the daily. Now, I overall was saying how Amazon does have a great amount of liquidity, right? It has a great zone to pay attention to. It's all of this right in here. And the weekly expected move is within that zone right around this 50 at this point. So if we did want to sell off for a few days, maybe even into next week, and then see some kind of bounce from this level, that would make a lot of sense. Buyers could step in, and maybe this MACD here does not get into negative territory. And we are stating how this could be some kind of daily pullback just because you have that divergence on the MACD, but not the RSI at the same time. This high came up a little bit higher. So that just leads me to believe there's more probability to some kind of pullback to go gain some buyers at this point. Real quick, thank you if you are subscribed. I don't have any sponsors or anything like that. So if you do want to donate to the channel, that's going to be down below so that I can put out more content throughout my day. That would really be helpful. But there are free ways to support the channel as well. So if you wanted to, watch some of those commercials that pop up just for a little bit, maybe go use the restroom, go get a glass of water just for a few seconds, let it run for a little bit. That actually really does help out this channel and watching the video all the way through. Let's get back into it. All right, zooming into the 2 hour on Amazon, we notice we're a little bit deeper into that negative territory. So if we do get some kind of bounce tomorrow and then see that roll over one more time and taking out this low, you would really be solidifying, hey, we're now switching to a negative trend. So if this liquidity doesn't hold up, you can continue to see that negative trend because we'll be in that negative territory on the MACD. Like I said, I am leaning towards some kind of bounce in here, maybe around that January 11th with the CPI, because those numbers are supposed to come in pretty good. So it's just something to pay attention to. But right now, I'm just notifying you, hey, Amazon is one of the ones kind of like Apple that did get into that negative territory. So it is telling you, hey, a negative trend could be beginning. If it really takes out this level, you know it's begun and you could head to lower levels pretty quick. Tesla, a little bit different story on the day, right? It's holding up pretty much right where it closed on Friday. So we noticed that this point was going to be very important, and we told you that in the last video because what did we do? Well, we broke out of this zone and we used that level to spring higher. We rejected from that area. When we got outside of it, we closed below it pretty quick. We reject from that area again. So we just know that this area right here is very important. So if it does start to lose that, I would really expect us to head to lower levels. And if you're part of the Patreon, you can pay attention to the weekly expected move, which is actually down in this area. So we want to pay attention to that. I believe I might have even said that the monthly was down in this area. The monthly is actually 35 points lower. So the monthly is actually somewhere around, 215 or something like that. So that is something to pay attention to. If we do get more dramatic selling in Tesla, you can see that come and test the bottom of this big triangle that Tesla has been in for quite some time. On the 2 hour, this is something that could actually happen. You notice that we did get into negative territory, kind of like Apple, kind of like Amazon. So that means that a negative trend could begin. And what we're going to need from here is maybe this to flag out sideways, kind of like it is right now, or even get some kind of bounce up. And that would set up that right shoulder we've been talking about in this head and shoulders, which is overall what I'm leaning towards. And that MACD would curl up, curl back down, really confirming that negative trend, taking out this low. Then we would be paying attention to that about 230 level at that point. Now, it is still pretty close to that positive territory. And the only thing I would say is if we do get some really good news, really good news with the FOMC minutes tomorrow or some kind of news that makes this one to push up, it definitely can. But if it did push up to higher levels, you would be setting up most likely some kind of triple divergence. So I'm just telling you to look out for that in case the news is good tomorrow, because nobody knows what is actually going to be said in the FOMC minutes. But if they stick with the same narrative, or there are rumors of that, them switching down to only 2 rate cuts next year, that actually might be bearish. People might see that as bullish initially and realize, hey, actually that's kind of bearish at this point because they actually lowered the amount of rate cuts they're doing next year. So those are the 2 things that I'm really paying attention to on Tesla. Video, some development since last night's video. We did cross on this MACD and you're right by that negative territory. So that just tells you if NVIDIA does see dramatic selling, we can start a negative trend on a daily scale. It's really important to pay attention to NVIDIA, and it is holding up above this trend, which I said was very important. So the fact that we're holding up above that, maybe we do get some kind of bounce and we're going to go into the shorter time frames and we could actually be flagging at this point. So the bearishness would be, the monthly is down by this low. I think it's like right on it. So if we wanted to head to lower levels, I would look for that area for a bounce. But if we do cut below that, because we could be getting some bad news tomorrow, then I am really paying attention to this zone. That's really what I'm leaning towards at this point. The only thing to the bullish side I would pay attention to is this looks like some sort of flagging at this point. It still could be considered a flag. We didn't break below our trend, right? So even though this does look very bearish, and I believe the signals are pretty, they're flipped to bearish at this point with the crossing of the MACD and closing below the 9-day moving average, this still could be some kind of ABC to head higher, and maybe we actually see that 540 and get some kind of all-time high in the SPY. So it's just something to pay attention to. We want to flip back and forth with price. At this point, these signals are bearish. Let's just see if we're starting some kind of 2-hour negative trend. And you can see we are getting into that negative territory, not the deepest, but we are in there, right? So if we do get some kind of flagging, which looks like might be happening right now, or if we get some kind of bounce early on tomorrow, that would make some sense. Get some support from this trend line. And then you want to pay attention if that's able to roll back over and take out this low, because that would really be confirming a negative trend at this point, and we may go test this low very quickly. I'm going to give you the monthly and weekly ranges for AMD this week. It's free, right? Because on Patreon, we actually do give you all of the other stocks that we do cover, but I'm going to give you guys this week because just to explain how it can react outside of these ranges. So when we do get well with outside of those ranges, you can see more dramatic selling. That's when that happens. but we do have that 68% chance to, come back into this range 68% of the time. So this is something to pay attention to. And the reason that I'm pointing out that we could see more dramatic selling is because AMD just now crossed. It just now crossed today on this MACD. We got a big selling day. We got a huge selling day down, but the pain could still be to come, and we could head to this zone down here with this liquidity pretty quick. So I'm really leaning towards this at this point because of this big down day, closing below the 9 and crossing on the MACD. We only have one bar on the histogram, one red bar that is, so we could see more of them. I followed the technicals, and I believe that the Qs and overall tech stocks did see some dramatic selling because these rates really went up pretty quick. This is the 10-year yield I got in front of me, and overall, I'm thinking that we could come up to this point of 4.362. I've mentioned that before, and you'll notice the reason that I'm leaning towards that is because we're well within negative territory. So if this thing wanted to go ballistic again, we would need to get all the way up into positive territory, and that would be difficult to do, especially when, they've been saying the job's done, they're talking about rate cuts. So I think initially we are going to see a push higher in these yields, but really depends on what the FOMC minutes says. That can cause some pain in the market, and then when they do start to drop back off, we will see that as good news initially. But if they start to drop off and cross through this channel that we've been in, then you're going to start to uninvert, and that has proven to lead to recession a lot of the time, which is very bad news for stocks. The dollar here, we were just pointing out in this area here, we were really talking about this because it broke through this trend here. It broke through its channel that it's been in. So we want to pay attention to that. And overall, I was just stating, hey, this is kind of weird behavior. This means that we're getting way, way too bullish, way too fast, and we don't really have that much structure. And now we're seeing, hey, a big buy signal on the dollar. We're down in this negative territory, but we're getting the crossing of the MACD. We don't necessarily have the divergence on the MACD, but we do have that down on the RSI down there. So we want to pay attention to this, how this could play out if we do just keep selling into 2024. Maybe we actually do come up to this level, and this is what we were talking about, and set up some kind of right shoulder, get a head and shoulders in this dollar, and then we see this thing start to take off, and that would be very, very bad things. And that's why we need to pay attention to Apple on the weekly chart, see if that is crossing, because that could be telling us a big, big hint. VIX is a fear indicator, right? So when the VIX goes up, that means there is fear in the market. And what happened today? Well, it started to spike, but it started to come back down, meaning people are buying calls and people are not necessarily fearful at this point. So if we wanted to, we could come test this 12-12, right? We've talked about that plenty of times, how we test 12-12. Right around here, we started mentioning that if we're just patient, wait for that 12-12, that's when the volatility comes back in. So really, this could come back down to 12-12 before we see more volatility come back in. But as this is, the fear hasn't gone and we get bad news tomorrow, we can really start to see this go ballistic. So we really want to pay attention right now. And we really, really want to pay attention to the VIX if it crosses on this weekly divergence. I'm just going to keep popping it up on every video because it is something that I really feel is important, because when this signal actually plays out, we see extreme volatility, because volatility can get into a positive trend. And that just means you can go into a positive trend for volatility for a long time, which means very bad things for the whole year of 2024. I believe the main takeaway from this video is to really keep an eye on Apple this week and into next week, because if that signal actually does confirm, meaning we get that red bar on the histogram on the MACD, it means some bad things are coming for 2024. But we have to pay attention to what is said in the FOMC minutes first and see what they have to say they're going to do in 2024, or if they're going to throw us into a recession right now. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. If you do want to support the channel so I can put out more videos like this, there is the donation down below, but you can do the free things like, watching commercials for a little bit longer, going and getting a glass of water and things like that. And I would really, really appreciate it so I can keep giving you more content in 2024. I hope the first trading day of 2024 was good to you, and I wish you all the luck in the world with all the rest of the days of the year. All right, peace.